Should we talk about Arsenal kids?
Finally. I can't believe it's taken us this long.
Okay, so you start. You want to start with the bleached hair one?
Uh, Emile, Emile Smith Rowe. Beloved of Arsenal fans, and very hard to say anything negative about him.
Not
But
so
he is
beloved of by Arteta. So
no, and not really by me, to be honest. But he's about to be 24.
yeah,
He has 44 Premier League 90s. And the last two seasons, I think he's got six 90s put together. After that season where he got 1900 minutes, got into double figures in the Prem. The season before that obviously came into a disgustingly bad Arsenal team halfway through the season and was a part of helping to make it look functional. So you can imagine if Arteta feels a degree of gratitude to him, given how bad things were at that particular stage. But Arsenal fans have always had very high hopes for him. They wanted him at one stage to be retrained as a false nine. They wanted him to play on the left instead of Martinelli. They wanted him to get 10 minutes. They wanted him to play as a left eight. And to me, this is absolutely the problem with Emile Smith Rowe. What is this guy's skill set?
I think they've had that in a number of ones where they're trained to be versatile, and then like the question is like, what do you really excel at? Because in a Champions League team, you need to be outstanding at a couple of things. You need to not just be pretty good at all sorts of stuff. Smith Rowe, I think when we saw him initially, you're like, oh, this is like an Odegaard, but Odegaard is so good that you didn't need another Smith Rowe. And then Havertz was taken up some time as an eight. And the other players that Arsenal brought in for midfield depth, like really haven't panned out. And some of the questions there are like, Arteta's been shit at playing young players, period. Right. Like, and you know, the balance of that is this is the Chelsea problem as well. Like, you are fighting for Premier League and Champions League, and that's your goal, right? So like your goal is not to bring kids in through the academy. But there's another element of it that says that, one, if you rotated your players maybe a little bit more, if you trusted the young guys a little bit more, they'll develop potentially more. We don't know if these players are not necessarily good enough. Like the Saliba thing is the most damning of that. Like he refused to play Saliba. Like he put him back out on loan and they refused to play for a while. Dude is the best, like one of the 5 best center backs in the world. You could have played him earlier, but he has no trust and no faith. Like his faith bar is very, very high. That's not to say that he doesn't know what he's doing, at least in terms of setting up the team tactically, etc. Like they nearly won the league last year. They were very, very good. But it does have a big damper on the value of those Arsenal kids and the transfer fees that you're going to get, and whether or not you're finding out, can they become a top tier contributor, or are they only going to be those kids that, rack up so many 90s at age 24, where you don't even know what to do with them in the transfer market. Like, what's the fee that we should pay for this guy, or that we should ask for this guy? Just whatever the market decides. Hopefully some scouts really love him.
Yeah, and he does seem like he has his fans. But yeah, what are the kind of ancillary benefits of becoming a better team? Should be that you can get more money for your squad unwanted. We saw Liverpool do that when they were selling Jordan Ibe for 16 mil or whatever. Well, this is a guy who has had a season where he got 10 goals in the Premier League. He was out over his skis that season. I think it was 12 goal involvements from 8 expected goals and expected assists. And yeah, I do think that when you look at him in detail, you think, okay, is this guy fast enough and good enough in the one-on-one to be a winger? No. Is he high touch, high creativity enough to be a 10? No. Does he have the shot volume to play as a forward? No. So maybe he could develop one of these things. But to me, it seems kind of like he should go to a more transition-heavy league. Like I think, Leipzig obviously brought him in on that loan that didn't work out because he got injured, obviously. But you could see how he would work in the Bundesliga. And you could also see him working really well, I think, in a team which has kind of hybrid attacking roles. So, for instance, in a team that uses a 5-3-2 or a 3-4-3 or something, anywhere where he can float between the wing and the middle of the park and use all the stuff he's got, which is why I've always been quite keen on a Leipzig / maybe a Brentford type move for him, because I could see them creating a role for him that uses the best of his talents.
If we think about Smith Rowe and say that, like, you're probably going to get 25 to 35 for him with some upside or maybe a sell-on clause, like that's That's probably the best you're going to get. And the question that you asked effectively is, would he be better at X? And the right answer should be, if he'd gotten more playing time over the last 2 seasons in all the competitions that Arsenal play, we would have a better signal on that. The other two players that you look at that have similar stories are Reece Nelson and
Yeah.
Eddie Nketiah. And the Nketiah, Folarin, Balogun debate last summer amongst Arsenal fans was really,
Oh boy.
it was interesting. It was sort of, nobody was going to have a right answer because you didn't really know. But Arsenal had to stick or twist with Balogun and Nketiah at the same time, and they made a choice. And Eddie's stats were terrible last year versus what we saw the year before.
Yeah.
Balogun's were quite good in Monaco, but Monaco's not the Premier League, and so we don't really have any more definitive answers either.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so when we see in the Arsenal fan base this criticism of Edu for his ability to sell Arsenal players for good money, in your theory, the problem starts further upstream. This is more of an Arteta issue.
Teams that are buying players have to have some comfort level with the performances they've already seen in order to accept more risk, and more risk means a higher price. So if you look at a player and he's in a league that you don't have comfort level that it produces Premier League level players. You're like, all right, we need to lower the price on that so that we're not taking on so much risk in case he washes out. Because in case he washes out is always a thing. With Smith Rowe, it's not just that where we haven't seen him play enough, but he's also got some injury history. So you're like, ooh,
Yeah.
okay. So if we buy him, like, how much can we really expect him to play? What's going to happen? And then, Reece Nelson had like a ton of loans, and then he got brought back into the fold, and then he didn't play again. And so even when Arsenal are making decisions to fill out that squad with potential players that they might be able to sell on for more later, if the coach isn't actually giving those players enough time to get those minutes to make it easier to sell them, that doesn't matter. The counterpoint to this is someone like PSG, who had a pretty easy run on their league last year. And a couple of seasons ago, it might have even been 5. It was one of the early StatsBomb conferences. Adrian Tarascon, who was the lead analyst there at the time and was most recently at Lille, I think he's got a new job coming this summer. But he basically said that the brain trust of PSG decided to play more academy kids to get them into the first team, but also to put them in the shop window and to give teams comfort level of what those academy kids were actually able to do in Ligue 1. And because that team usually was so mismatched against the rest of the league, they had more opportunity to do that. So you see them distribute minutes wider so that teams that might want to buy from them and are able to have more comfort level in what they might be getting, and then pay slightly higher prices or have better add-ons or what have you.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I hadn't really considered this before. And
it's
it
very
does,
strategic, and
yeah.
it makes sense knowing that these are all assets that you might sell at some later date. But if the only goal is to win trophies, then it has a different set of outcomes and strategies.
Yeah, so maybe the calculus on that will change, though. Now with greater fixture congestion, the need for a deeper squad, you might see some of these managers say, "Oh, actually, I've left myself with 13 guys I trust, and a bunch of kids who have never seen a football pitch."
The problem here is that City are so deep that you never get a chance to be able to do that if you're going to compete for the trophy. And the second problem is the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th race now is pretty spicy as well.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, the Premier League is probably the toughest league in the world overall. It used to be an argument between that and Spain. Now you get more depth, much more money, and you have to be careful in how you do everything because it might cost you that little bit of edge you need in order to get into the places.